Hello everyone, here we are in the thesis portion of your structural videos. So as you're working on your argument, the main goal to keep in mind for your thesis, and yes, for presentation you need one just like you would for an essay, your main goal should be to set up, which you will have already kind of contextualized in the intro, but directly in one sentence you're going to define what you think is Smith's argument or main point in the essay you've selected, and then you're going to articulate your response. So I'll show you the example in a moment, but this is the main framework. Again, it's very simple, very to the point. It's something we're going to need to know very clearly, and then of course you will expand upon that within the body of the presentation. So my big advice here is to be honest. As I know we've talked about throughout the semester, we've looked at, a dozen or so essays from Smith. We've gotten a very complicated understanding of who she is as a person, and obviously her particular worldview is tied into her cultural mythology, like we talked about from the first day of class. So I don't expect that everybody is going to be in total agreement with her. I know we talked about this in some of the readings, and that's definitely not what I'm asking for you to do in this assignment. I really want your honest response, and I don't want you to think that it's going to turn out better if you totally agree with her, because we'll look at some models of good writing this week that actually are totally based on disagreement with someone. So the whole point here is you don't need to agree with her. You just need to be able to craft a response of agreement or disagreement, or maybe your thesis is going to say, I understand her in this regard, but I don't in that, or something along those lines. You just need to make sure that whatever your response is, it's warranted, and what I mean by that is it has some sort of research support. So in a second, we're going to look at the example that I provided within the sample presentation, but like I said, even though the sample I gave is focused on agreement, somebody could easily have gone totally in the opposite direction, which I'll mention in a moment, and say, this is why I disagree with this idea. So let's go into exactly what it looks like to craft this sort of thesis within the presentation. So we already in the previous video talked about the context of establishing exactly what you think that her theory is, right? So keep in mind the theory that I had established or contextualized was this idea of comedy uniting people. And as I mentioned, for the intro setup, it's just about saying this is how I know that that's her main point, right? So now once you get to the thesis, you're responding to that. So the thesis says, in Dead Man Laughing, Smith argues that comedy has the power to unite otherwise isolated people. This theory rings true within current culture. So here it's a little bit more of a complication of that uniting people that I had set up in the context, right? Now it's saying it has the ability or the power to unite otherwise isolated people. But again, it's basically saying that same thing. And now here we get the main reason for doing this presentation, which is about a response, right? This theory rings true within current culture. So like I said, you can decide exactly how you want to frame this. I could easily have said, this theory is unwarranted or unjustified. I could easily say, this theory is overly optimistic, right? So I'm not going to give you a particular phrasing on how to interpret your response, but it needs to be clear from the get-go when I'm looking at the thesis. You contextualize, you said this is her argument, you said this is how I know that it's her argument, and now you're going to explain, here's my response to it, right? So depending on your response, you might have a little bit of overlap between the thesis and what you've already contextualized from the piece, or you might end up going in a totally different direction. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next video, in which we break down how to kind of organize the body paragraphs, or the body points, I should say. But the main goal here is set up what her particular argument is and be honest, be sincere in saying exactly how you feel about that. So we will come into the body paragraphs in the next section. I will be right back.